this question of women escaping and running away is one that it kind of catches me up and makes me pause and stop me in my tracks.
Myself, I know I'd be like, okay, I need to take everybody or I'm just gonna stay. Because I couldn't think of leaving my kids.
Run, Mary, run, run, Martha, run, Mary, run, I say. You've got a right to the tree of life. You've got a right to the tree of life, yeah.
Well, hello, Tiya. How you doing? I'm Jonita. People call me Jo. Film critic, writer, and I don't know. I just started reading your stuff, your articles and things, and I'm kind of fangirling a little bit because some of the stuff you've written is great. I even wrote down a couple of quotes of yours to kind of that kind of relate to the conversation we're supposed to be having today. So yeah, I just needed to admit that I'm a little nervous and I'm a little fangirling a little bit. So, just getting that out of the way.
Well, hi, Joe. That's really, really sweet. Such a surprise to hear. It's a pleasure to meet you and to be having this conversation with you. Do you think we should start by just saying a little bit about ourselves?
Yeah. Yes. You first. Go ahead.
Me first. Okay. Well, my name is Tiya Miles, and I am a scholar of slaveries, and that's plural, in the United States. I have done a lot of research on the enslavement of African and African descended people in Native American communities and nations, as well as the enslavement of Native Americans and Africans and their descendants in the various colonies of what is now called the United States and in various states of the US. And I have had a really strong interest in the experiences of women during enslavement. And I've been developing an interest in the relationship between environmental histories, environmental changes, and practices of enslavement and the experiences of enslaved people.
Oh, wow. So I'm Jonita Davis, and I'm a like I said, a critic, film critic. I'm a writer, essayist, author. I have a fiction book out. My work, my criticism, even the reviews I write that are on Rotten Tomatoes, they all kind of sort of go back to my unofficial minor that in grad school and I have my master's degree in English, cultural criticism. And pertaining to today, I did a little bit of diving and looking at how enslaved women were treated, kind of throughout, I don't know, film history. So I didn't get to do as deep a dive as I wanted to, but a kind of a survey. And I did find a few interesting things that I wanted to, kind of see what you thought about, some of the findings that I've come up with. But yeah, that's me. I'm also a mom. And doing this work and being, a mom is kind of sometimes they kind of overlap a little bit too closely. And I actually have a story. The movie Harriet, when it came out, before it hit the main theaters, there were some people who saw like early screenings of it, and there's a lot of rumors about the depictions in it, and they talked about a lot of things that were there are a lot of reasons why the movie was not good, and none of the complaints kind of hit on some of the things that were close to my heart as a mother, because when I saw it, I really was struck by the decisions that had to be made with who to leave behind, and the decision, if do I go and do I leave my family here and kind of risk coming back, because to me, when I was watching the film and watching this character Harriet Tubman making this decision, I'm like, I know in that moment I would be thinking, there's no way in hell I would be able to come back traveling the way she did, thinking that, oh, I would come back and I'll just come get back and get everybody. No, I think me myself, I know I'd be like, okay, I need to take everybody or I'm just going to stay, because I couldn't think of leaving my kids. So that's why I said in the top of this, our pre-taping conversation, where I said, doesn't it seem obvious why enslaved women would decide not to run because of the kids they have? That's why I said that, because, you know, to me, if I'm not going to leave my almost 7-year-old, you know, just because I can't take her with me. I mean, I would be more inclined to stay with her to protect her, you know? So, and I saw that being missed by a lot of the critics that were reviewing the film and judging this character based on her what kind of wavering, you know, and that really struck a nerve with me.
Well, you have just said so much. You said a lot about the film and the ways in which we might try to process these decisions in our own time, recognizing that we weren't there, we didn't live in that time, and we really can't know what that decision was exactly like. And also, you referenced how enslaved women in that time might have actually approached these decisions. So my immediate thoughts in response to what you were saying went to first watching that film with our daughters, and it was an interesting experience. It felt like a bonding experience for us. And I definitely had my mom hat on and my, you know, scholarly, you know, critic hat on. And I think my mom hat won, because I saw my daughters come out of that seeming energized, seeming informed, and seeming proud. I think they appreciated having a different take on Harriet Tubman than what they had gotten in grade school or middle school classrooms for those brief periods of time when she might have come up at Black History Month or Women's History Month, for example.
Yeah. And,
you know, that film chooses to end the story on this moment, you know, this wonderful, beautiful moment when Harriet Tubman, you remember that scene, like you shake your head, you know, her parents, her family, they're all gathered in the safe and new home in the North. And, you know, we see her beautiful smiling face, and then she closes the door. Of course, Harriet Tubman's real life didn't end like that. She struggled because the circumstances that enslaved women faced did change in freedom and did change after the Civil War, but not 100%, you know, not completely. They were legally free, but they still faced so much trouble and had so much trauma around issues like, could they bring their families back together? Could they afford to sustain healthy lives for their families? What kinds of jobs were going to be open to them? What did it mean when they walked out into the world and had to contend with racism, no matter where they were, had to contend with extremely limited options, and those moments of feeling degraded publicly, which would happen to them and would happen to their loved ones, would happen to their children. So as a mother, I felt content with the film and that experience, and the conclusion with, you know, happily ever after. But as a scholar, of course, you know, I knew and you know, we all understand that is actually quite a romantic take about Harriet Tubman's life and also about the lives of Black women. So, right. I mean, I agree with you that this question of women escaping and running away is one that kind of catches me up and makes me pause and stop me in my tracks, because when I think back to that time and try to project myself there in my mind, when I just kind of enter into a thought experiment and I wonder what would I have done, and I have done this many a time, and it sounds like you have too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I tend I tend to think that I would not have the kind of courage that it would have taken to run. And that's even without going to the question of if I was a mother under those circumstances, would I have had the heart to leave my babies behind? I would say probably no and no. That's a double no.
Yes.
And, the records do tell us that enslaved women did run to a lesser extent by a large degree than enslaved men. And it would make very good sense, and it has been argued by historians, that a large reason why is because they were mothers, they were caretakers, they were family members, and they may have been more likely to have been in locations where they still had some family ties, as opposed to men, and they would have thought twice, three times, and four times about whether or not they could or should actually make that move. But Harriet Tubman, she's such an interesting historical figure because she didn't have children of her own when she ran, and I don't think that we actually notice that. I don't think that the public thinks about that or notices that. We just think of her as this incredibly brave, this heroic woman who did something that was tremendous, and that's all true.
Mm-hmm.
But her life circumstances were specific.
Yeah,
and she loved her family very deeply, which is why she kept going back. But she didn't have children, and I think that's something that we really should factor in when we try to interpret the choices she made.
Yeah, we've kind of built her up like she's a superhero, and when you put those superheroes up on a pedestal, then they're not human anymore. So she's got these superhuman abilities. Even the way they've romanticized her, the headaches she used to get, and
yes.
they've become a magical premonition type of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
she's sort of just a superhuman character, and I think the movie Harriet kind of brought her off that and kind of knocked her off the pedestal a little bit. It's still romanticized. The ending was a big part of it, but I think it was like the first time that we saw a depiction that was closer to what she really went through. But yeah, there's a superhuman, a superhero type of quality that she's gotten over time. And you're right, we don't think of her connected. We don't think of the fact that she doesn't have children, so she's kind of an exception to the rule, almost. And when you said something about children, and staying and that how important children are to enslaved women and their decision making. I think of the film Beloved. It's a horror film. And for, everyone kind of watching this conversation, and it's a horror film because the mother, she runs away and she takes her kids and she thinks she doesn't think she's about to get caught. And to save her, she doesn't want her children to go back into that situation. I think people kind of missed, a little bit the first time because, again, when that movie first came out, people were kind of missed a little bit the part where, and this is a spoiler if anybody hasn't seen the movie, but the mother of these, she has to kill her children. She's like, I wouldn't have you go back into that environment. Yeah, by yourselves without me. I know what they would do to me, what they caught me. They're not going to do that to you. So she murdered her children. So the gravity of that moment, in the book, it just kind of catches your breath. I think that says a lot about that, decision, that tie that children have on enslaved women, and that, that kind of element, and how significant that element is to their existence and their, not only to the decision on whether they stay or whether they go, but everything they do. And it stayed with her so much to where the horror part of the movie is, one of them comes back in the form of a demon and haunts her, so that stays with her, so she doesn't get rid of it when she finally gets away and she doesn't have the kids. I mean, that's horrible to say, actually. Um, but when she does get away, and she does, and you know, her kids are no longer a worry. She still has them heavy on her heart. They're everywhere. Even when she's a free woman, those children are still a tie that binds her to her enslavement. So I think in film, there's been some very great examples but I don't think they've been processed, maybe, in a way that really ties them to the realities of enslaved women, if that makes sense.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Beloved, both the film and the novel, because it helps to open our conversation into different ways of thinking about what it means to try to run, what it means to try to escape. Mm-hmm. Toni Morrison, you know, a master, yes, a master of the word, a master of the human emotional landscape. I mean, she showed us through this astounding novel, which was based on the historical experiences of Margaret Garner, an enslaved woman in Kentucky, who as you pointed out about Setha, the character, did attempt to run with her family. Morrison shows us not only how horrific the cage of slavery was and how psychological it was, as well as being physical, but that individuals, including women, developed just profoundly startling and sometimes damaging ways to try to get out of that cage. So here we have a mother who, as you said, murdered her children when she engaged in, I think, you know, what she would have experienced as mercy killing. You know, in a moment of kind of almost snapping out of reality, but also seeing reality, seeing slavery for what it was. We see that in the character Setha. For Margaret Garner, the historical figure on whom Setha is based, we don't have that kind of visibility because she was a real person, and we can't see into her actual life and her motivations. But Morrison showed us through the character Setha what a Black woman might have been experiencing, and we see all that turmoil and all that that inner conflict that a Black woman faced around. You have produced life, but what does it mean to live in chains? What does it mean? And Setha, the character, you know, based on Margaret Garner, the historical figure, determines that a life in chains is no life at all that she wanted for her children. And so she created this horrific way out through taking her children's lives. And your opening of this up just reminds me that I think it's important for us to say that Black women did escape. It's not that no Black woman ever escaped. Black women did escape. Black mothers did escape, sometimes successfully, but those successes were actually rare. Black women, Black mothers did often engage in short absences, you know, often referred to as truancy by historians, where they would go off for a period of days and sometimes taking their children with them. Sometimes trying to, you know, hide and subsist in the woods with their babies to protect their children from sale. That comes up a lot in the firsthand accounts of enslavement. And so we do see them engaging in behaviors, making decisions that are diverse and that are absolutely stemming from their own personal experience. There's no cookie cutter response of Black women ran or they didn't run, but their children, if they had children, were often a very important part of the equation. And, you know, we also see Black fathers who don't want to leave their children. I think it's important for us to note that. Mm-hmm. Again, it's hard for us to get at that because we don't have the kind of historical documents that can help us to really see inside the experience of Black fathers. But we do have some narratives, and one that comes to mind is by Henry Bibb, who had been enslaved in multiple locations and even ended up being enslaved in Indian territory by a Cherokee man. Yeah, did. Wow. And ran away. Wow. He ran away. But he loved his children. He loved his wife. He adored them. And leaving them was horrible for him. He only really made that decision once he realized that his wife had been lost to him.
Yeah. And that is a very important point. And actually, I have to look up that story because we don't see Black fathers in these, even in the narratives where, you have the whole family being depicted in these, in, film and in novels and things. You don't see the dads really wrestling much with it. It's more the mother who has that, tie to those kids. But, you're right. In reality, the father would have those are his kids too. He would have that bond. He would have that. But it's kind of notable that the Black father and Black fatherhood and enslaved Black fathers and Black fatherhood has not come together in pop culture and in cultural elements at all. That's something to note right there.
It is.
Yeah,
you're right. We don't have that film yet, right?
No, we don't. And in the films that we have, he's kind of disconnected, and he's kind of the one pushing the mom and sometimes guilting, her on her decisions. So yeah, that's really interesting. You got me. I've got to ponder that one for a second.
Run, Mary, run. Run, Martha, run. Run, Mary, run, I say. You've got a right to the tree of life. You've got a right to the tree of life, yeah. Run, Mary, run. Run, Martha, run. Run, Mary, run, I say. You've got a right to the tree of life. You've got a right to the tree of life, yeah. Run, Mary, run. Run, Martha, run. Run, Mary, run, I say. You've got a right to the tree of life. You've got a right to the tree of life, yeah.